Hello and welcome to the On the Couch podcast, the podcast that gives you the view from the therapist chair. I'm your host, John Dennis, a licensed professional counselor. You're listening to OTC episode 31 with Julie Ohana of Culinary Art Therapy. Welcome back, OTC listeners. Last episode of 2019, Season 1. So this episode is just in time for the Thanksgiving holidays. In America, that typically brings family and friends together, whether you're doing a Friendsgiving or Thanksgiving with family and a weird uncle or, cousins that are closer than best friends or, whatever that might be. A lot of times the holidays just call up so many memories of family and times together. And a large part of that is food, the meals that we share together, some of the recipes that are handed down from generation to generation, just different traditions that we have. And this episode with Julie Ohana of the Culinary Art Therapy practice is just so cool. When I found out about what she does, I knew I had to have her on the show. So I was really glad to be able to link up with her and set aside some time to just talk about what is culinary art therapy. It's one of those sort of outside the box a little bit. When you hear it, you're like, what is that? But it was just such a good conversation with her. She's such a great wealth of knowledge and really big proponent of just the family meal. And you'll hear us talk about that a little bit. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for tuning in during Season 1 of this project. And as always, I really hope that this has helped somebody access mental health or grow in learning about themselves or dealing with things that they may be struggling with. So thank you as always. Julie is an LMSW in the state of Michigan, and she has developed a passion for cooking that started when she was a little girl, from cooking family recipes and baking with her grandmother on up through into undergrad and grad school, where she got her bachelor's in counseling from SUNY Empire State College, and then her MSW from Yeshiva University's Wurzweiler School of Social Work in New York City. And she's been featured on CNN, Huffington Post, Psychology Today, the New York Times for her culinary art therapy practice. And now I am honored to share this episode with you. So I have here on the Couch podcast, I have Julie Ohana, culinary art therapist. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is lovely to have you on. I've been looking forward to this. Ever since I saw you on CNN, I was like, I have to reach out to her. I got to find out about this. So.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be able to be here with you.
Yeah. So how did you get into this? How did you get started in culinary art therapy?
Well, it all started about almost 20 years ago. When I was in graduate school, we were faced with the daunting task of needing to write a master's thesis. And somehow, I don't even remember making a decision or debating other topics. This was something that just came to me, and I knew this is what I wanted to write about. So I wrote that thesis about the idea of cooking as being therapeutic. And back then, Google certainly was not, what it is now. And researching topics like this was definitely a challenge. But somehow I made it happen and wrote that thesis. And it really has just evolved over the years from there.
Okay, wow. So it was almost like epiphany, like clear as a bell. This is what I got to do.
It really was. I'm somebody, I grew up spending a lot of time in the kitchen with family, with loved ones, I remember coming home from school as a kid and using cooking as my way of unwinding and just kind of decompressing after a long day, and really, looking for something that would kind of fuel me and keep me going. And that's what cooking always was. So when I entered the world of social work and I needed to make a connection, it was just a very clear choice for me that this is what I wanted to do.
Okay. Have you had to get dual degree? Is it, you have a degree in culinary arts and in social work and therapy, or?
I do not. My degree is a master's in social work, and I wish that there was a program in culinary art therapy. In the U.S., there's not. In other places in the world, I know there are similar programs. But I think for me, that's part of the journey, is trying to raise awareness and, help bring this professionalized program to the world, to the U.S., in hopes that one day people really will be able to get a certificate or a program in this, much like art therapy or music therapy, any of the other creative approaches to mental health.
Mm-hmm. Is that the next progression? Is you're gonna like start the program?
I would love for that to happen. I am, it's baby steps. I've written a curriculum for other professionals to be able to utilize this kind of work in their practice, because I do get a lot of requests and emails from other professionals who want to do work like this or who do similar work to this and are looking for a more formalized way to include it in their practice. And, my hope is if you get enough people on board and, high enough demand, that this is the direction that it'll go.
Sure. Well, yeah, I got to be honest. I almost reached out to you in a negative way. I brought up what you do with culinary art therapy in the supervision group that I run for our group practice, and I almost lost our entire staff. They were all like, why am I not doing this? They all wanted to leave and do culinary art therapy.
Well, it's definitely, I think they go hand in hand for sure. And, I would never say, let's abandon all traditional therapy and throw it out the window. That's certainly, not what I would ever recommend. But I do think there's a time and a place for both. And I think the way the world is right now, I think people are receptive to other ideas, more out of the box creative process. And I think, people, this appeals to people, not everyone, that's okay. But I think
Sure.
to many.
Yeah. Now, have you had much pushback in terms of, licensing boards or, and I'm not aware if you go through insurance or if it's private pay or, yeah.
So it's private pay in my practice, mostly for other, insurance purposes. But because I am a licensed social worker, I'm able to make use of that license and be able to bill that way. So that is a tough one. When people say, oh, I want to be able to do this, I very strongly recommend and urge people that part of why I can do this and call it what I do is because of my background in social work. It's not the cooking alone. It's the combination.
Well, and yeah, I'm very interested to get into that of, how do you blend the two? Can we, I guess, start at the beginning of, okay, let's say I reach out to you as a client. What is the process and what does that entail? Do we meet at, your house, or do you have like a kitchen at the office, or
Right. So let me preface it with saying a lot of what I do in my practice is not what I would call, none of it's traditional therapy, but a lot of what I do isn't even therapy. It's more about mindfulness and other ways for people to have an activity for themselves or engage with others, whether it's their family members, their coworkers, colleagues, and just be able to do an activity that's good for them, that makes them feel good. That's a way to bring people together to connect. So it isn't always about the clinical sense. It's not always about therapy, one-on-one, dig deep into your psyche and get to the root of a problem. sometimes it's really just about doing a healthy activity. That said, when it is more clinical and when it is more therapeutic, someone will reach out to me. Certainly they have questions. I'll do my best to answer as many questions as they have. And then I always start with a questionnaire that I have. That's my way of starting with an intake process. So it gives me a sense of, why is the person reaching out to me? What is it that is their presenting problem or their struggle that they're looking to address? What are their needs? What are their goals? Do they have any allergies? When you're talking about cooking in the world of food allergies, that's always an interesting piece to it.
Especially in today's world, yes.
Yes, absolutely. So, I ask a lot of questions. I try and collect as much information as I can. And then every session is really tailor-made to each individual client, really based on where they're at, what they're looking for, what they're looking to accomplish, and what speaks to them. Typically, I go to the client. I would love one day to be able to have an office space that includes somewhat of a commercial kitchen. But I've also found a lot of the groups that I do when I do corporate events or team building activities, I actually don't always have access to a full kitchen. And it still works great, because a lot of the work is in the process isn't necessarily about heating the ingredients or putting them in the oven. It's more about the chopping and mixing and working together, that you don't necessarily need, a full kitchen to make that happen.
And yeah, it made me think of, so I do a lot of couples counseling, the potential harm, but also potential benefit of team building exercise and communication of, a couple or a family making a meal together and seeing what that dynamic is like. And then I would say also, to go back to your earlier point with therapy, I guess to kind of debunk the misconception that not every therapy session is like this deep, psychoanalytic dive on your childhood and everybody's like a crying, blubbering mess. There are sessions, where you're working on other stuff. It's not as heavy. So,
right.
Yeah. And are there particular issues or particular diagnoses that don't lend themselves well to working, doing culinary art therapy sessions?
I don't think it's as much about the diagnosis as it is about the state of mind. I know that there are some people, I'll tell them what I do and they'll say, oh my gosh, that would be the complete opposite for me. Being in the kitchen brings me so much anxiety. I hate cooking. Well, then this probably isn't the practice for you. But, if somebody has an openness and a desire to want to be in the kitchen, that's really who it works for. I think the vast majority of people that I see, it typically revolves around some sort of anxiety. I think anxiety is just so prevalent in the world these days.
Yes, it is.
And because so much of this is really about mindfulness and learning just how to kind of put that anxiety aside and manage it and cope with it, I think that's where this has really been the most effective.
Mm-hmm. Well, so as I was, preparing for this, I was just thinking of all the different facets and hearing you talk about the mindfulness piece of it. Yeah, I could really see the benefit to it of, just as you were talking, I was picturing somebody, zesting a lemon or, something like that, where it has a lot of, different senses to it of just the sounds and the smells and, the feel of cutting into a lemon or something like that. And the benefit that you get through the mindfulness exercises in that. Right.
So you mentioned the senses, and that's a great piece to it because, while I was starting my work with this, I learned that how strongly the senses are tied to so much of our emotions, and specifically the sense of smell is the strongest sense tied to memory. And when someone has positive memories of foods and dishes and, family meals, conjuring some of those images up again really can be a very powerful experience. And I found it to be really helpful for a lot of people to be able to tap into that in a way that they really never thought of before.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm so glad that you said that, because I normally share that with clients, that fact about your sense of smell. And, I think all of us, especially, family events, holidays, I know especially in America, you think of like Thanksgiving or Christmas or Hanukkah, as being those big times, and a lot of times tied into our grandparents or aunts and uncles or cousins.
Exactly. Right.
Which I got to throw in. I found so interesting in terms of your last name, Ohana.
Yeah.
I imagine you're aware of this, but so in Hawaiian, Ohana is it means family, but it's like a much broader sense of like community and friends and extended relatims.
Right.
So, I thought that was so cool.
Yes, it is. It's definitely a happy coincidence. It's not Hawaiian in my family's case, but I do love the meaning and the connection and the irony that means related to my life and my family for sure.
Mm-hmm. So as you're preparing for this, is the client picking out recipes or things that they want to cook? Are you helping with that? Are you giving away family secrets or
No secrets here. I'm definitely a person who shares recipes for sure. It's a process where we work together, based on that original questionnaire. And one of the questions is, what are your favorite foods? What are your favorite flavors? What flavors don't you like? What foods don't you like? Obviously, I don't want to suggest a dish. If someone tells me one of their, they hate cilantro, I'm not gonna suggest dishes that are just covered in cilantro. So I try to come up with suggestions and offerings that I know are going to speak to the person's sense of liking and what they're interested in. But also there's a point in the process if we're talking about loss, or someone's talking about missing a grandparent and the grandparent is known for making certain dishes, then part of that might be that we recreate that dish together. So it really depends on the person, depends on the situation, and working with them on their goals and needs.
Mm-hmm. And it made me think of there's a children's book on grief called Tear Soup. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
I'm not.
It basically talks about a grandmother who's dealing with a loss, and it's unspecified what the loss is, but the idea of her grief process as a recipe for making soup, and the idea that everybody's recipe is a little bit different, and
I love that.
The size of the batch of soup depends on how big of a loss it is and things like that. So, but yeah, that idea of, making something that really means something to them of, my grandmother and I used to always make this, or, that
right.
kind of idea.
Yeah. Wow. That's great.
And as you're cooking, how do you deal with that? If somebody becomes overwhelmed with emotion, or they really get hit with a memory or something like that.
And that's exactly where the social work background comes in. It's the cooking is the vehicle and it's the tool, but it's not the end game. So, if someone needs a moment or they're so overwhelmed, it's not about, well, we have to finish the recipe, we have to make the dish. It's you pause where you are and you deal with the emotions as they come up. That's really what it's about. So some recipes might work and some might be better than others and some might fail, and that's okay, because it's not always going to be about the dish itself. It's about the person in the process along the way.
Okay. Yeah, and that's good to hear that it's not an episode of Hell's Kitchen where you're like yelling at them and
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
We've got to finish on time.
Exactly. Right.
Are there trends that you've seen in terms of, I almost think of like psychoanalysis of, the things people like to make, or things that you're seeing in terms of like, wow, a lot of people really like making, matzo ball soup, or, Yeah.
I think it really depends on where the person is coming from, what their background is. I think there's definitely something to be said about comfort foods, and based on our background, that those comfort foods are going to be different for everyone. But I think the concept of comfort food is very much a real thing.
Oh, definitely.
For sure. It's very powerful. And I think really the trend in general is just the food piece. I think we live in such an age and culture where food itself is so trendy, that I think that also has helped me in my process of letting people be open to this idea, because there is such an appeal to food in general.
Yeah, it's I've found, it almost seems kind of polarizing. Like I find so many people are much more like into food.
Right.
I found very few people that are like, nah, it's just fuel. It doesn't really mean anything to me.
Absolutely.
I definitely think there are a lot of people that are like, I love eating the food, I don't like preparing it.
Right. There's those too, for sure.
It tastes so much better when somebody else makes it.
Yes, definitely both kinds of people for sure. But I definitely think food is one of those universal themes that a lot of people do feel very strongly about and very similar about. And it, it's emotional, and it's a connector, and it brings people together.
Definitely. Even, as we were talking about, we both have families, and I know from my family background, just the different meals that were like, they were special events, or, some families had like, well, every Friday it's, pizza and a movie,
right.
Or, you have those lives built around the kitchen and the dinner table.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, not everybody has that. But I think, trying to get back to that, or stress the importance of that is big.
I think it's huge. I think you couldn't be more right. And that's something that I'm very passionate about. And I talk a lot about that with people, the idea of the family meal. It might not look in almost the year 2020, which sounds so crazy every time I say it, the Donna Reed concept of the family meal, the family supper might not look the same in our daily lives, but that doesn't mean it doesn't need to look the same. The family meal might be Sunday brunch. It might be when everybody's not rushing off to school and work. And it's not going to look the same for any two families. But I think as long as people do what works for them, and they understand that they don't need to try and make it look like someone else's idea and concept, that's okay. It's really just about owning what works for you and going with it.
So it doesn't have to be Pinterest perfect, is what you're saying?
Absolutely. Right. 100%.
Okay. And with, I'd love to hear just your take on, do you clean as you cook, or do you cook and then clean?
So I'm a little bit of a neat freak. I am a little bit of a type A personality. My poor husband, who's also an amazing cook, and I think I've kind of taken over the kitchen over the years because he's afraid of me telling him he didn't clean up good enough. So I clean as I go. I'm also a big believer in keeping things simple. And, there's nothing I love more than like a good one pot meal. You don't have to dirty 1,400 dishes and make more work for yourself to make something a successful meal. So I'm all about the simple, easy, quick, not bigger than life, juice chicken all over the kitchen, messes for days. No need.
Yep. And I'm glad you brought up the one pot, and obviously, there's a reason why, the heavens created a crock pot and,
right.
and an Instapot.
Right.
Kind of stepping outside of the already outside the box culinary art therapy, are you also helping people, and like, you think of like the corporate parents that like they're on the go, and are you also helping them with like, meal planning and like, okay, how do you, set aside time for this stuff?
Yes. Yes. And I think a part of that is, I'm a working mom. I work 5 days a week, and certainly my kids aren't eating, these slow roasted stews for days. I mean, that's not what we're eating all the time. Some
You're
nights
not hand rolling sushi, and
they do love sushi, and we have made sushi, but it's certainly not a regular occurrence. There's plenty of nights where they're also eating, chicken nuggets and fries from the oven. I mean, you have to do what works. And I think people have to understand that and not be so hard on themselves that it has to look and feel and taste just a certain way. You have to kind of get rid of those expectations and do what works for you. And some nights are going to be pizza takeout, and some nights are going to be a home cooked meal. But it's about connecting and coming together and using the process to better your lives.
Well, and going back to, we were talking about the family, do you have your kids helping out? Are they right alongside you, chopping or putting stuff in the pot or, yeah?
It depends on the day, depends on the kid. I have 2 little ones. They're 7 and almost 9. And my 9-year-old is a daughter, and she is much more interested in cooking and being in the kitchen with me. My son, my younger one, isn't quite as interested. He's from day one. He was never the adventurous. Yeah. But it's baby steps. We made fritters the other night. I was so excited about this easy, quick concoction. And my daughter wanted corn and my son wanted broccoli. And we made it work. We made it happen, and they loved it. My son tasted a few bites, which made me happy. And, you keep your expectations low and you keep it simple, and you kind of just have to learn to enjoy the small successes.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, along with the previous point in terms of the, kind of getting back into the therapeutic cognitive distortions and the expectations that we set on ourselves. I think all parents can connect with, I worked so hard to make this meal, and, they wouldn't even touch it, or,
right.
We're having this, why can't we have, pizza again for the 5th night in a row, or, yeah.
Right. I think you have to know your audience. You have to keep your expectations reasonable. And if you have a picky eater, why bother with a fancy 5-course, cooked all day? I think that's in some way setting yourself up for failure. Mm-hmm. You have to know your audience. You have to know time and place, who you're cooking for, when, so that you can set yourself up to succeed and not to fail. I think that's a big important piece to it.
And we do that so much to ourselves. I mean, we really set ourselves up for failure a lot of times. I know I'm notorious for this. Like when I go to do a romantic dinner for my wife, I'm pulling out it's like an episode of Nailed It, where I'm trying stuff that I've never tried before under the gun on Valentine's Day.
Right.
With I've decided to mix 5 different, cultures, cuisine.
Right. You want to do it all.
Yeah.
Right. You have to, it's important to be realistic and to not, overreach, so that at the end of it, you feel good about your hard work. Hopefully the person you're cooking for appreciates the effort and the idea. But I think it's really important that at the end of it all, when it's all said and done, that you can look back and feel a sense of accomplishment and pride in what you did.
Definitely. You're listening to OTC episode 31 with Julie Ohana of Culinary Art Therapy. We'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor.
Would you like to talk to a counselor but can't find the time? Would you rather talk to someone from the comfort of your own home? If so, Parenting and Family Solutions is here to help. We now offer teletherapy to all clients who reside in the state of Pennsylvania. Using our secure portal, you can have a video session with your counselor using a laptop, desktop computer, or smartphone. Visit our website to learn more at www.parentfamilysolutions.com or give us a call at 717-602-5560 to see if teletherapy might be a good fit for you. Let us help you build a stronger family and a healthier you.
What are some of the positives that you've seen come out of some of the sessions and some of the therapeutic relationships?
So one of my favorites, sticking with the family idea for a second, one of my absolute favorite things that comes out of a family session is when you're working with the family, and so often as the adults and the parents, we know best, and we think we have to run the show and we're in charge and it's our way. But when you're cooking with your kids, I think it's a great way, and there's so much ability to show your kids that they can take charge, that they can make decisions, and they can decide, do you want to include this ingredient? Do you want to leave it out? Do you want to mix it this much? Do you want to use this utensil? How do you want to do things? And to really let a child step up and take the lead and have them see that their parent trusts them and gives them the sense of leadership. It's so powerful. And I think so often parents don't have the opportunity to be in that position, or it's hard to create the right opportunity so that your kids are going to do something safe and it's going to turn out okay. This is a great, powerful way to give it a try. And every time it never ceases to amaze me. It's really a powerful experience for everyone.
Wow. Yeah. That's definitely something I'm going to have to hear over and over again. So thank you. Because I know as the times that I've had my daughter help out with cooking, my OCD and my anxiety usually goes way up, where I'm just like, oh my gosh, you're going to, get eggshells in the eggs, or you're going to light something on fire.
Or you're going to make a mess and it's going to be more work, and then I have to clean it up. And for sure. I mean, I have all those moments too, but I think it's about just being, framing it in the right way, that if it's Tuesday morning and you're rushing to get to work and get out the door, that's probably not when you want to have your little ones help with breakfast.
Yep.
But if it's Saturday morning and you can make pancakes, and if the cleanup takes a little bit longer and you're not rushing to go somewhere, then, let them take a try and let them have that experience in a way where you can relax a little bit more to be present and enjoy it with them.
Yeah. Are there particular activities that you'll, suggest while the family is eating, or while a client is eating, of just, kind of going back to the mindfulness?
Yes. Great question. So the session and the experience definitely doesn't end when you plate your meal and the oven is turned off. Part of the power of this experience is in the interaction. It's in the table time. So there are, my family, we have, it's called a conversation starter. It's a card game, basically, of different questions. A lot of times when I work with families, I'll actually work with them to make their own conversation box, where the family's writing their own questions or drawing pictures, creating their own experience, and then being able to sit down and utilize it when they have their meal. Because again, it's about that quality time together. It's not just about the food. It's about the interaction. It's about the bonding and the learning about one another, and showing that you care, showing that, knowing what happened in someone's day, it matters to you. It's not just about the food.
Oh, I love that, because it made me think of like Trivial Pursuit. Like the box. Like just pulling cards out from the front or the back or wherever, and, everybody going around and sharing.
Exactly.
Are there any particular questions you would suggest be in somebody's, box of cards, or, do you kind of leave it open?
I'd leave it open to them. For me, I think it's important to have a mix of questions. I think if every question is this, deep philosophical, complicated question, it's going to be exhausting, and eventually it'll get old and people won't want to do it. But if the questions are also, what's your favorite color? And it's just too surface level, there won't be enough depth to it. So I think it's important to touch on both. You want to have the deep, meaningful discussions, and you also want to have the light, silly things also that can just make you laugh and have a good time while you're doing it.
Yeah. So, a healthy mix of, would you rather have your legs turned into French fries or your nose be a strawberry or, yeah.
Exactly. Right.
There you go. Other positives that you've seen come?
From spending the time together talking?
That individual sessions, anything. Yeah.
Another piece to the talking part and the eating part is the confidence boost. When whoever's cooking serves a meal and everybody, hopefully it turns out well, and everybody's saying, wow, this is so delicious, this is so good, I've never had something, all those comments and all that feedback. It's a confidence boost. That's a win for whoever's doing the cooking to be able to say, wow, look what I did. I fed my family. I made a dish that I've never made before and everyone loves it. It's a self-esteem boost that we all need from time to time. So that's a huge plus.
Yeah, no, I could see, especially like if you have the kids make the meal, I could see where that would be, they would get a huge kick out of that.
For sure. I think, kids, it's absolutely huge. And even for the adults, I know how good I feel when I make a meal or a dish for whomever, and I know that it's enjoyed. It brings me immense joy. And I've been cooking for many, many years, and that feeling just never gets old.
Mm-hmm. And how do you deal with when things don't go, perfect?
Yes.
And I'm more thinking of like me as a counselor and business owner. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what if there's a grease fire, or like what if somebody cuts themselves, or
right.
Yeah.
So thankfully, I've never had any fires. I've never had any major traumas in the kitchen, and
I think I heard you knocking on wood in the background.
Right. Hopefully, I'm not jinxing myself here. But of course, not all dishes are going to turn out to be massive successes and, recipes to keep for the generations. Sometimes they come out and they're just kind of or they do fail. And I think failure for kids and adults alike it's a huge, important part of life, that not everything works out. Not everything pans out the way we planned, and that's okay. I think for all of us, we have to remind ourselves that things don't pan out the way we always want them to. They don't work out as planned. And sometimes we give it our best effort, our best attempt, and they still don't work the way we want them to. And that's okay. That's all a part of life. Again, I think that's where social media, it's like a blessing and a curse, and the Pinterest age and Instagram posts, and you see everyone else's lives that seem so perfect and beautiful, but they're not. And we all need reminders of that too, that life isn't perfect, and not all of our efforts are going to turn out the way we want them to. But you have to know that, and you have to accept it, and you have to, pick yourself up and try again.
Yeah. And just that idea of the teachable moment,
Yes.
Being able to learn from that. I think, it's such a weird time that we live in, when you see, if you're in like a restaurant or something like that, and you'll see the food come out, and like, instead of like taking a moment to smell it or, wait for everybody else's meal to get to the table, like what's everybody do? Everybody pulls out their phone.
Right.
and takes a picture of it and posts it.
Right. Yep, that's exactly it. And while that can be so much fun, and it's a great way to share your experiences with friends, that, there's a lot of positives to it. There's also that negative, that sometimes it's really easy to just assume and to think that everything else is perfect. And when my life isn't perfect, I'm the only one that's happening to, when of course that's not the case. We have to remind ourselves.
That's just on social media.
Exactly.
As a mother, I mean, do you have rules around technology and devices at the dinner table, or what would you recommend?
Yeah. So this is we have two rules. So we're Jewish, and we have Shabbat dinner every Friday night as a family, and which we sit at the dining room table, not at the kitchen table. And my kids, it's funny, they call that the Shabbat table, not the dining room table. And they know that under no uncertain conditions, there's no technology at that table, no matter what.
Never, ever, no.
Never, ever. And the kitchen table, the rule is when everyone is sitting together, there's no iPads, there's no phones for the kids or for the adults. Of course, not every night are we all eating together. It just can't happen 7 nights a week. So from time to time, they will, if they're sitting there and they're the last ones to eat and they want some quiet time, they can have their iPad sometimes. But if we're all sitting there together and it is a family meal, then nobody's sitting there with their technology. We're sitting there with each other and being present in the moment. And even if it's a 5-minute meal, we're taking in those 5 minutes as a family.
Mm. That's so awesome that you brought up Shabbat, because I'll spare you the stereotypical fiddler on the roof and like my awful singing voice of like breaking into tradition, but yeah, that idea of like oral tradition, yes, but also culinary tradition,
right,
being passed down. Can you speak to just the importance of the Shabbat and those traditions?
Right. So I found that a big piece to the family meal and cooking in general, it is about tradition, and every family has their own traditions. And I don't think the importance is necessarily in the what. And I've told other friends this too. We have Shabbat dinner every Friday night. I cook every Friday. But I tell people that you can create that tradition for your family in a way that works for you. If that means Chinese carryout or pizza, whatever it is, but you're still adding in elements of tradition, whether it's lighting the candles or saying blessings. Every family should have the opportunity to create their own traditions and carry on their own traditions. I think there's so much value and there's so much benefit for kids to grow up and to see that and be able to carry it down to their families one day. And that's certainly what my hope is and how we do our traditions.
And can you kind of just spell out briefly for those that maybe are not aware of Jewish faith, or what is Shabbat? What goes into that?
So Shabbat is basically, it's the Jewish Sunday. It's our day of rest. And that day, every Jewish holiday, or in this case, Shabbat, starts at sundown. So it begins Friday night. And the tradition really starts with the meal. We light candles to bring in Shabbat. We say some blessings over certain ritual foods, drinks, grape juice or wine, bread, challah, which I've been making my own challah with a recipe that I am just totally obsessed with. And
oh, wow.
That's a huge part of the tradition for me. And we have
makes
a family meal.
Great French toast.
Yes, it does make great French toast for sure.
Not exactly kosher, but
yes, good stuff. And we eat together. We sit as a family. It's a time for extended family to come together. We spend every Friday night with my parents, my sister. We all just come together, and the week just quiets down a little bit and brings us together. We're able to connect, spend quality time. Like I said, there's no phones, no iPads, no outside noise, or we shut it off as much as we can, and just really enjoy our family. And that's what it's about.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And I know we hadn't really talked about that before. It's interesting because I grew up outside D.C. and in Potomac, so I went to high school where there was a very large Jewish community, mm-hmm. and so on my end, a little bit more familiar with it, and have a lot of friends that practiced Hebrew faith. But yeah, I think in a lot of traditions, a lot of cultures, a lot of religions, obviously, just the importance around food and family and tradition That's always so interesting to hear how people do things and what's important.
Absolutely.
So as we prepare for Thanksgiving here, what goes into yours?
So Thanksgiving, it's a great question. One of my favorite holidays, full of traditions all the way. Turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes, green beans, all the typical, elements. And the piece to Thanksgiving that's my favorite is, again, that it's the quality time. Everybody comes together and there's the discussion of what you're grateful for and what makes you happy, and really just kind of taking a time out from the fast pace of life and connecting with one another. And to me, that's the best part of Thanksgiving for sure.
Definitely. And yeah, I mean, the theme we've been talking about throughout of, on the culinary therapy side of things, of the mindfulness and being present, but on the family side of things of also being present and enjoying that time together. So
right.
I think when I talk with a lot of clients, one of the Gottman Institute Love Maps questions is like, what's your favorite holiday? And almost invariably for people, it's usually between like Thanksgiving and Christmas and Hanukkah are the three big ones, I would say.
The holidays definitely have a lot of opportunity for food, family, togetherness. So it makes sense. I think it can provide some struggles for some people, rightfully so. But there's also a lot of beauty and a lot of qualities there that are really beneficial.
And I think, even if you have somebody that they didn't have that growing up, that idea of like, you can start that now.
Absolutely.
You can create your own traditions. If, like you said, if you want that to be, Chinese, if you want that to be, lasagna or whatever you want it to be, you can start your own family traditions and build that.
Exactly. There's no two families look alike, and they're not supposed to. And, it's really wrapping your head around that we all make our lives look and feel the way that we want them to, that we need them to. And it's empowering people to realize that they can create that for themselves. And if they don't have the nuclear family that they picture as being what you need to have, then you create it for yourself. And that's a good thing.
Are there other aspects to the culinary art therapy you'd like to share with people? Any other things about it?
I think, to me, one of the pieces that I really want people to know is there's elements to this that could work for most anyone. And it's not, again, it's just no two families look alike, no two culinary therapy sessions look alike. And what people take from the sessions is really individualized and unique to them. And I think there's something to be said for everyone, that there's the benefits, the power of it. It's different for everyone. I think there's different pieces that speak to different people. And that's part of what I love so much about it, is the universal qualities that really can work for almost anyone.
Definitely. How do people find you? Where are you at? Website?
Yep.
Social media?
Yeah. So my website is www.culinaryarttherapy.com. My email is listed there. My website's there. I am on Instagram and Facebook, Culinary Art Therapy. Definitely happy to have people follow along and reach out if they have any questions.
Yeah. Any major projects in the works for, now, 2020?
Yes. Yeah. I'm in the finishing final stages of publishing a curriculum for other mental health professionals to be able to utilize in their practices. That I'm hoping for that to be printed and ready for purchase, hopefully the end of the month. And definitely looking forward to sharing that with the world.
And do you have like a cookbook in the works, or do you have,
No cookbook yet. As part of the curriculum, there are recipes included in there, but hopefully one day there will be a cookbook to follow.
That's awesome, man. I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk. Thank you so much for the work that you do and just being willing to explore, I guess what I would say, a non-traditional type of therapy and just the way that can help people. So thank you.
Thanks for listening and for your interest. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Take care.
Thanks.
So, folks, that about wraps it up. That puts episode 31 and season 1 of the OTC podcast in the books. And I am looking forward to a little bit of time off, and then I will be back with season 2 in 2020. In early January, I already mentioned this, just so thrilled that I was able to line up time to speak with Lori Gottlieb, New York Times bestselling author for Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. And in addition to that episode, I have episodes lined up with Megan Hunter of the High Conflict Institute talking about her book, Dating Radar. I'm going to be talking with Dr. Dominic Sisti, who is an assistant professor at UPenn and the director of the Scattergood program for the Applied Ethics of Behavioral Healthcare, as well as Amy Johnson, a mental health worker and advocate with the Therapeutic Exploitation Link Line, talking about what happens when a therapist becomes an abuser. So those are just a few of the episodes, interviews, and topics that we have lined up for Season 2. I look forward to recording some more episodes, getting to talk to some more amazing guests, and hope that you'll join us for Season 2. Have a good end of the year, and I'll see you all in 2020. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe and review wherever you're catching this podcast at. You can check out detailed show notes and archived episodes at www.pfsonthecouch.com. If you want to stay up to date on future guests and contribute questions, be sure to follow us on your favorite social media platforms. The author and host of this podcast is not engaged in a therapeutic relationship with the listener and cannot give counseling advice without a confidential appointment. Listeners should be sure to consult with a licensed therapist in their area or seek emergency medical attention if they are experiencing psychological difficulty. A special thanks to the band The Topsy-Turvies for the show theme song. Their song, Like a Living Dead, can be found at topsyturvies.bandcamp.com. The bump interview track was the song 1973 by Bruno E. The author and host of this podcast is John Dennis. Special thanks to editor and show producer Trevor Groff.